Hello all, and welcome to this little video tutorial for OCR B GCSE Geography and Population and Settlement theme. And this is the first video in this tutorial, and we're going to look at the question of how is global population changing. Okay. Now these videos are going to be structured exactly around the syllabus, so we're going to take the actual questions from the syllabus and the outcomes from each of those things. So by the end of this tutorial, you need to know that population is growing faster in some parts of the world than others. You need to understand that countries with the highest population rates of growth will have a rapidly increasing population. Sounds about right. And you need to be able to shade and name on a world map countries that have large and small increases in their population, and describe how the countries with the fastest rates of growth are in some of the poorest parts of the world. Okay. But before we get into that, I want to think about what's happened to the world's population generally. What's happened to the global population? Okay, so this is a graph to show world population in billions. Okay, I'm starting in 10,000 BC, going all the way up to 2000. Okay, so in 2000, we had a world population of around 6 billion. Now in 2012, it's more like 7 billion. Okay, so in 2012 it reached 7 billion. In 10,000 BC, the world's population was less than 100 million people. So in that 12,000 year period, which sounds like an enormous amount of time, the world's population increased by 6 billion. But if we look at a smaller scale, okay, you can see that here, the world's population reached its first billion. Okay, so it took well over 11,000 years to reach that first billion. Okay. In that next, say, 400 years, we added 6 billion to the population. Okay, we're up to 7 billion now. 6 billion to the population. I was born in the world of 4.5 billion. Okay, so 1982, born in a world of 4.5 billion. So since I was born, we've added 2.5 billion people to the world's population, which is pretty astounding. Now, if you're interested to find out how much the world's population increased since you were born, I'd go to the URL at the bottom of the screen, which will take which takes you to this website. And all you simply do is add in your date of birth, click submit, and it'll tell you what the world was like, or approximately in terms of its population. Okay. It's a bit easier to think about what's happened to the world's population on a much smaller scale. So we're going to think about it from 1700, 1800 onwards. Now this graph shows the world's population growth again in billions, and each of these white lines are billions. We've got 1 billion, 2 billion, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, what that is, sorry, 8, 9 billion. And what I want to show here is how long it took for each of the next billions to be met. Okay, so to get to 1 billion, we've already sort of talked about this. It's taken over 11,000 years. Okay, to get from 1 billion to 2 billion, 1804 to 1927 was just 123 years. Then we go from 2 billion in 1927 to 3 billion in 1960 is just 33 years. 3 billion to 4 billion in 1974, just 14 years. 4 billion in 1974 to 5 billion in 1987, just 13 years. 5 billion to 6 billion in 1999, just 12 years. Okay, 6 billion in 1999 to 7 billion in 2012 is 13 years. Oh, sorry, 13 years. And then projected up to 2024, from 7 billion to 8 billion is another 12 years. Now what this shows us is that as the world's population gets bigger, the rate of growth Okay, so how long it takes to get to the next billion gets quicker. Okay, and this is what we call exponential growth. Okay, so as the world's population gets bigger, the time it takes to get to the next billion gets shorter. The world's population is increasing quite rapidly. Around this area here, okay, population explodes. Okay, we call this a population explosion. Okay, where the population starts to increase really rapidly. You can see that the change in the rate of growth here. Okay, up to about 1927, the world's population had been increasing gradually. Okay, then after 1927, where the population explodes, it increases rapidly. Okay, now in an exam you might get asked to describe this. Okay, and it is as simple as those terms. Early on, the population is increasing gradually. It then explodes sometime after 1927, and after that point, the world's population starts to increase rapidly. Okay, that's really important to remember. Now, what's causing this population change is down to 2 or 3 different things. I say 2 or 3 because the migration bit is more to do with the movement of people between places, so changing the population of certain places. Okay, we're thinking on a global scale at the moment, so this is mostly down to births and deaths. Okay, the number of people born and the number of people who die. Now, births is measured in something we call birth rate. Okay, and birth rate is the number of births per 1,000 people per year. Okay, so the number of births per 1,000 people per year. Really important you remember that. Okay, now deaths is measured in a similar way. That's called death rate, and this is quite simply the number of deaths per 1,000 people per year. Okay, make a note of those two definitions. Just pause it and jot it down. Okay, migration, when we're talking about like changes in populations of certain areas, okay, is quite simply defined as the movement of people from one place to another. Okay, movement of people from one place to another. We're going to do about migration and how that affects places in much more detail later on. Okay, in another tutorial. So I just want to sort of acknowledge the fact that it can change populations in certain places. The two main ones for what changed the world's population is these. Because ultimately, these are the things that naturally affect the world population. If, I don't know, 1 million aliens came and landed on planet Earth, which is unlikely in any of our lifetimes, migration might come into them, but for the most part, we're ignoring migration in terms of the global population change. Now, to think about how this population change actually works, I want to use the analogy of a bath. It might sound a bit bizarre, but bear with me, and hopefully it makes sense. So, into a bath, we add stuff. We add water. Okay, and gradually that fills the bath up. Bottom of the bath, we have a plug hole, and that lets water out. Now imagine you fill the bath up, you left the tap running, you take the plug hole out. If the same amount of water going into the bath is leaving the bath, so the same goes in as the same goes out, the amount of water in the bath stays the same. If we add more water going in, okay, so now there's more water going into the bath than there is going out, the amount of water will go up. Now if you replace this with water with births going in, more people are being born, and the stuff going out is deaths, and the water in the bath is the total population. Okay, if we add more births into the population than there are deaths, then the population will go up. There's more people going in than there are going out the population, so the population gets bigger. If we then, let's just erase those, get rid of these. Ooh, I don't want to get rid of the whole lot, so I will do have to now, won't I? Okay. Now bear with me a second. Okay, so say now we have only a little bit of water going in, only a few births going in, but loads of water going out of the plug hole, loads of deaths. What's going to happen to the population? More people dying, more people leaving the population because of death, than there are people coming into the population through births. The total population. But, so you'll get less people in the population. More people are dying than are being born, you get a smaller population. Population will start to decrease. We can show this in a little bit more detail here. We're going to talk about this one here, natural increase, population getting bigger. Okay, so natural increase is the population getting bigger naturally. Oh, getting bigger. It is late. It's getting on for 10 o'clock here. Naturally getting bigger naturally. Okay, and by naturally I mean through births and deaths. So as we looked at before, we need, for a population to get bigger, we need there to be more births than there are deaths. Okay, so birth rate, we're going to abbreviate that to BR. It's got to be greater than the death rate. Okay, we'll abbreviate to DR. So for a population to increase naturally, birth rate has got to be bigger than death rate. Make sense? So more people going in than there are going out, its population will get bigger. Email. Right. The next one to look at is natural decrease. Okay, and this is where the population we're writing out there now, gets smaller naturally. Okay, so population gets smaller naturally. By naturally we mean by births and by deaths. Okay, so in this case we need deaths to outweigh births. So we need death rate to be greater than the birth rate. Okay, so natural increase is where birth rate is greater than death rate and the population goes up. Natural decrease is where the death rate is greater than the birth rate and the population goes down. So let's have a look at how this sort of works on a global scale. And there's differences. So if we go back to our major thing, we have to think about how different countries around the world, so let me put that a little bit more articulately. let's go back to our original outcomes and think about how different countries around the world might have different rates of growth and the reasons why they might have different rates of growth. So this little diagram here, this little graph here, shows the world's total population. It shows what proportion of it is accounted for by developing regions and developed regions. Now, by developed regions, we mean MEDCs, such as the UK. By developing regions, we mean LEDCs, such as Uganda or something along those lines. Ethiopia, if you like. Okay. Now, as you can see, the MEDCs, the developed regions, account for much less of the world's population growth than the LEDCs. Okay. Why is that? Why do LEDCs have a higher population growth than the MEDCs? Why do MEDCs have a lower population growth than the LEDCs, which have a higher population growth? And again, it all boils down, population growth. It all boils down, again, to births and deaths. Before we explain that in much more detail, let's just look at the facts. Okay? So this map shows which countries grow the most and the least. Look at the scale. Those pink ones, these ones around here, okay, are all growing at a rate of more than 2%. Okay, a rate of more than 2%. The lighter coloured ones, such as the UK, these ones are growing at a much less rate. So this is the UK, for example, is between 0.0% and 0.5%. This is Russia. This is actually growing up. This is going backwards. This is population decrease, natural decrease, because it's got a rate of growth of less than 0.0%. So it must be negatives. So let's just identify a couple of these countries which have got decent rates of growth. Okay, let's pick out some random ones there. Okay, so we've got. You want to know what this country is? Okay, Madagascar here. Okay, that's growing at a rate of over 2%. It's growing quite quickly. Okay, we've also got countries such as the UK, where the rate of growth is much less. Okay? All these countries here are LEDCs. All the pink countries are LEDCs. All the, well, for the most part anyway, the lighter countries are MEDCs. So this is proving our fact that we've asserted in this one correct, if you like. So those countries that are poorer, the LEDCs, have got faster rates of growth than those countries which are richer than LEDCs. Okay? But what causes that? Why do LEDCs have high rates of population growth? And it's because they have a high birth rate and a high death rate. Okay? So, suppose technically that's not that true. Okay? It's mainly because death rates are starting to fall. Okay? So they do have a higher death rate than, say, the United Kingdom. But the reason why the population is getting so big, so fast, and growing so fast, is that now the birth rates are bigger. The death rates, more people are being born dead. Death rates are starting to fall. We'll focus on that, the reasons for that why first. So why are death rates starting to fall in these poor countries? Well, they're getting better medical care now. So diseases such as cholera, typhoid, malaria, and things like that are on the decrease because they've now got drugs available to them. Maybe not in the quantities that they want, but they've now got drugs available to them that will help them fight those sorts of diseases. Okay? In addition to that, we've got things like better sanitation. So a lot of the work that goes on in these countries to help them develop is to improve their sanitation, and by improving the sanitation, by sanitation I mean things like their sewage, their toilets, things like that, you actually decrease the rates of diseases. Okay, so by making better sanitation means that less people get diseases and less people die. Okay, other things might include, in some areas at least, improved access to food and clean water. Okay, if they've got better access to food and clean water, they're more likely to have a healthy lifestyle, more likely to live. Okay, so that's the reasons why death rates are starting to fall. They've got better medical care, they're getting better sanitation, and they're getting improvements in their access to food and clean water. So why are the birth rates so high? Well, some of this is down to things like lack of contraception. That's really rubbish handwriting, I apologise. Lack of contraception. Okay, by contraception I mean things like condoms, the pill, etc. Okay, and it's not readily available. Okay, in the UK, for example, you can pop down to Tesco and get yourself a packet of condoms if you want to, whatever. And in places like Tanzania, say, or Kenya, it's not quite as easily accessible. So people, obviously, when they're having sex, they're not protected against or don't have any form of family planning. Okay, so that may be another one, lack of family planning. Okay, so in a lot of these countries, they don't plan necessarily how many children they're going to have. So over here, a lot of people make a conscious decision about how many kids they actually have. Okay, maybe not such as thought out a process. And the reason for that, okay, is that in these LEDCs, because of their the way that their economy works, there's a lot of agriculture, and a lot of agriculture that happens within the family. So family-owned farms. It's called subsistence agriculture. Okay, and that means growing stuff for yourself. But to be able to do that, they need people to work on the land. So they have babies, so they've got people to look after the land eventually. So need children. Need children to work. Okay, that gets an income for the family. Okay, there are other social reasons. Okay, why they might have a higher birth rate, and that might be they want to continue family name, for example. What if you're a Tanzanian family, okay, and so for your family name to continue, you need to have a boy. First baby you have is a girl. Second baby you have is a girl. Third baby you have is a girl. You still want that boy to be able to continue your family name. So you keep having babies in some instances until you have that boy to continue your family name. Okay, so those are just some of the reasons. If you, I haven't got time to go through all of them in so much detail, but have a look in your revision guides and be able to get a few more. These ones should be enough to keep you going. Okay? So let's have a look at MEDCs, why they have a lower rate of population growth. Okay? Now, we have low rates of population growth because we're pretty steady. We have low birth rates. Okay? Not many people are born necessarily in MEDCs. We also have low death rates. Okay? Now, the reasons why we have low death rates are good healthcare, access to food and water, let's say medicines to prevent disease. We've got good sanitation systems. Okay, etc. So those are the reasons why we've got low death rates. Make a note of those. Now, the reason we've got low birth rates is we've got access to contraception. So pop down Tesco's, get condoms, whatever. Okay. Other reasons we've got low birth rates is to do with not needing children to work. Other reasons might be women in our society, in more developed societies, have higher status. And they work, okay? Now, while people are working, it does tend to be that they have less babies, okay? Other ones might be education, okay, about family planning. You'll have all done your sex ed, you'll have all done the safe sex stuff, all that sort of stuff. Not many people in less developed countries will have access to the same level of education. Okay, so we've got some reasons there why the UK has got low birth rates and low death rates. Now, because these are both low, okay, that means that the population in MEDCs is quite steady. Okay, doesn't really grow much. It doesn't really do anything. It's just quite steady. If we go back to our original graph, we can see that this is the case. We've got really slow, not much growth at all in those developed countries. Okay, here we've obviously got much bigger growth in these LEDCs, and that's down to the fact that here birth rate greater death rates. Okay, in developed countries, MEDCs are much more similar. Okay, the difference between birth rates and death rates isn't so great, so the growth isn't as big. Okay, now I hope that all of that has made sense. If it hasn't, go through the video, pick out the bits that you need to pick up again. Go to BBC Bitesize, use all the information you've got available to you. Come and see me if you need to. Okay, many thanks.